Hi, everybody. My name's Heather Matwatso, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Chaos to Order project, which I have been working on with Birmingham City Council, looking at the ways of multi-agency working with people who hoard in the city. And so we're going to have I'm going to introduce you to me, then we're going to have a look at the project, but we're also going to have a look at hoarding itself and the understanding of why people hoard, because I truly believe that if you understand what's affecting people and how it's affecting them, then you should be able to work with people just a lot easier. So my name is Heather Matwatso. I am the founder and director of Clouds End CIC, which is the UK's first social enterprise to work with people who have hoarding issues. And I set this social enterprise up because I was working as a declutterer, which was a nice job. And I worked one-to-one with people in their homes, helping them solve storage issues or having a bit too much stuff, or just needing someone to give them a bit of guidance around organization and helping them just to do a messy room, really. Very rarely was anybody in jeopardy or in trouble or under threat until one day I was contacted by Sandwell, actually, housing, and they said, we have a lady who has a hoarding issue. We have forcibly cleared her house twice and it hasn't worked, and now she's had her children removed. And they said, we are the family intervention team working with the local authority, and we really want to try and get the family back together. Can you help? And I said, oh, I don't know, but I would like to try, because I have hoarding in my family, but not where I grew up. So both my maternal aunts hoarded, and one of those aunts was mine and my sister's favourite aunt, and we used to stay there every weekend. So hoarding wasn't unfamiliar to me. I just thought it was just her. I didn't realise anybody else had this as an issue. But I'd read a little bit about hoarding in the books that I'd read about decluttering. Anyway, I said to the group that called me, I would really love to do this work, but I know it's a long-term thing. So how about we take 6 months and we do once a week for the first couple of months, and then once a fortnight, then once a month, and let's see how it goes. And they said, great, at least we've got an idea of what we can ask for funding for. And this was over Christmas as well, so I knew it was going to take a while. So at that time, I then bought all the books I could find on hoarding, which weren't many because they were all from the US. This was about 2006. And I've read them avidly, and I got the go ahead and I started working with this lady, and I loved this work. I just thought it was fantastic. It was so rewarding and so interesting. And I started to understand my aunt then. You know, I understood what had really gone on with her and what she'd really been struggling with. And so I thought, this is what I'd like to do. So then I looked around to find someone who was doing this work that I could help. And there was nothing. And so that's when I decided to start Clouds End. And 2009 wasn't a brilliant year to start a social enterprise that might rely on funded projects, certainly to start with. But Sandwell had also asked me to do a training course, which I'd never done before. And they said, just tell us what you did and put that into a training course. So that was how it started. And that's how Clouds End really has continued, by doing training with people up and down the country. And so when Birmingham City Council asked me if I'd consider doing a project, you know, this has been my life's hope and dream, then I said yes, absolutely. But I also knew exactly what shape the project would be, because I knew that the issues up and down the country were exactly the same. And so we'll have a look at the overview of the project, what it is, and did this, obviously this altered because just as it started to get going, COVID started. So we had to rethink. Lucky for us, skip companies never stopped working, and clearance companies didn't stop working either, because they'd always worn PPE. So because of that, we still managed to do actually much more work than I'd expected. So that was fantastic. Then we're going to look at understanding the condition. Like I said earlier, I think this is really important, because this is the key to working with people and to working with others, working with people. Because if you all understand it, or if one does and they can help guide the others in a multi-agency sense, then you will just get much better results. And then why supportive intervention works. Supportive intervention is the name that Cloud's End has trademarked for the development of multi-agency teams working, not teams, Microsoft Teams, as in real teams, people that gather together and support a person, but that person is also part of that team, which makes everybody equal. Because a lot of people that you will be working with, you will have an imbalance of power where the power is in your hands and the person you're working with feels powerless, and that in itself creates a disconnection which doesn't help. And then we're just going to look at how many people we worked with in the first project, which was 2019 to 2021. That project has now been replicated for another 2 years, so it's going on till 2023. So the name is Chaos to Order, which I think talks for itself. And this is something that I've always had an ability to do, is to see order in chaos. But you have to have chaos to see order. Otherwise, I think it's harder to see order and create chaos from it. Because I think we are naturally, most of us are given to looking for ordering things. We need order, and I'll explain that a bit later on. And I've based it on one of those little puzzles that you get in crackers. I don't really know their proper names, but the ones that always have a little, like a little gap, so that you can move things around. And working in a hoarded home is very much like that. You know, sometimes you haven't even got the gap to give you a starting point. So what is hoarding? Well, it is a mental health issue. It was originally recognized in 2013 in America because it was given a diagnostic criterion. Prior to that, people could not diagnose hoarding disorder, even if they were standing in the middle of it, because it didn't have a criterion to diagnose it. Now there is one. And then in 2018, the World Health Organization declared that they were going to recognize hoarding disorder for the rest of the world. The NHS had already acknowledged the American definition, but they didn't create, and they still haven't got an official pathway, but they do have a bit about it on their website saying, visit your GP, which can be useful, but not always, because not all GPs know. And also contact the fire service. The fire service are usually a very good agency to go to, especially when you're worried about safety, fire safety. Get their advice around that. And it affects 2 to 5% of the population. And this is a statistic that was prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has spawned a lot more hoarding behavior because, as you'll see in a bit, it's anxiety based mostly. And people have been very anxious, and we still are. Now we've got pandemic we're coming out of, but we've got war that we might going into. So these are feeding grounds for people that have anxiety-based issues. But one thing it isn't, it's not a choice, and it isn't laziness. It's really important to know this, because often in training people go, yeah, but what about the lazy people? And I honestly can say I've never met a lazy person. I've met very frightened people, and I've met very confused people who don't know, because, as I'll explain in a bit, hoarding is caused usually by trauma, and that is not a choice, and you cannot turn it off. So it isn't laziness. It just appears to us because we need a quick explanation for something that is distressing us. And it's not a problem, although it's treated like one. It's a solution to a problem. So you can see already there's a huge disconnect there between people's opinion and thoughts and what's really going on. And it has no social demographic. It can happen to anybody. It's often thought that it's the elderly that are more affected by this. It's probably because the elderly are more visited and people are more likely to see hoarding as hoarding behavior. Whereas in younger people, certainly in young families, it's classified as neglect. It's misread, it's not interpreted correctly, it's not investigated sufficiently. So the Chaos to Order project originally aimed to work with 100 people with hoarding issues over 2 years. So that's 50 people a year. And the basis of this project is education. As I said at the beginning, if people understand, they've got a much better chance of working with people. To have just a referral project means nobody learns anything except how to pick up the phone and pass it on. And really, it is so much better that people learn how they can help, what they can do, how they can talk to somebody, rather than just giving it to another agency and say, this isn't our work. If you understand it, you can help people, you can talk to people the right way, and just that alone will start to make a difference. So education is very important. So lots of training. There are lots of training courses throughout the year, multi-agency ones. They're on my website. They're on the Safeguarding Board's website, I believe. There's one April, June, July, September and November this year. And next year there'll be from January through to September as well. I can also do individual 1-hour webinars. All this is included in the project. So if your agency or your team feel that they just would like a live webinar one-to-one, then we've got question facilities at the end. And then that education is encouraging and talking to multi-agencies, and then mentoring those multi-agencies to talk to each other, work together and support each other. And then the specialist mentoring placement with students. And this is done with myself and Ruth Hare, who is the social work supervisor. And it started off that I'd asked for one social work student placement because I thought it would be useful. And I thought it might be interesting to have somebody who had a specialism early. And this then was so popular that it's now become a sort of accepted part. I think we're on to our 4th cohort, I think, are coming next month. So there's been about 12 students that have gone through this so far, and there's probably another 5 coming in April. And so that means they get a very one-to-one, they can spend more time with people, and some of the cases they work with will carry on through to several students if that's needed. But it means that people get a really good bite of that cherry. They manage to do a lot more specialist work instead of which they've asked for. So, and then Birmingham City Council said some wonderful words to me when I first spoke to them. They said, we're looking for innovation and creativity, because what we've done in the past hasn't done anything. It hasn't done any good. So without looking at new approaches, new thinking, then we're not going to learn anything. Things are just going to get worse, and they're going to get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed into round pegs into square holes that won't fit, square pegs into round holes that won't fit. And so that was delightful. So under that guise, we are linked in with Birmingham University, with the psychology department now through a PhD student who came to the project from a master's project placement, as well as the adult social care ones. And also we're doing a whole series of art projects for people who hoard. And so they are addressing their hoarding through art. We're also making a documentary about that as well. And then finally I said, can I have some money per head for emergencies? And I can't tell you what they are, because, when you do a funding bid, you have to explain what the funding's for. And I said, I can tell you what they might be, but I can't be specific. So within that, I'd said, I'd like to provide people with tablets if they wanted to do video work, this was pre-Zoom, so that was really just serendipity. I'd also like to provide them with skips, with if they're ready to have them, to provide them with people that will fill the skips for them if that's what their need is, because they are unable to fill a skip themselves, which is often a cause of hoarding in itself, physical disability. Counselling, really whatever, some storage boxes, a camera I've bought for somebody because her need is to take photos of things. It wasn't an expensive camera, but a camera so that she can take photographs of things so she can let them go. So that was okayed as well. So really, I am a very happy woman, and I love this project. It's got a lot of data with it. We've got far more than 100 people that we've managed to work with somehow, and we're now in year 3, which is going to end up, as I said, it will finish in September 2023. And the outcomes are, that I said I would aim for, is I would aim to educate 400 to 600 staff, educated and empowered to understand hoarding issues, using this idea of supportive intervention, teamwork, supporting each other. Birmingham, I want Birmingham to be loud and proud about the fact that they are working with people who hoard, because they have funded this. They've had the foresight to fund a project to do this for something that is a huge need. And so I've developed something called the Hoarding Charter, which looks like an old-fashioned charter that will be, because Birmingham likes charters. And so that will be signed by the city, and we will encourage everybody involved to sign this. We're waiting to do a big party with this one. So that was obviously not going to happen in COVID. And now we're waiting for the Commonwealth Games to pass. But when that's happened, we're going to get the Hoarding Charter signed. And there are ambassadors, are the people who have been helped by this project, who have agreed to have their testimonials used. And some of them have asked if they can go on to help people who have this issue, because people do become very generous and evangelical when they have finally got out of the grip of something they didn't know they were in. As I said, 100 people, but it's over 250 so far. They will have received structured help. Evictions and child removals will be avoided or certainly reduced. Clients themselves will feel empowered and reassured that they are understood, they have been listened to, and there is a way out. And as a result of this sympathetic support, they'll have much more self-knowledge and confidence. In fact, the other day, I just spoke to somebody, yesterday, I spoke to somebody who said, she said, it's helped me in so many, she said, I was really scared to have somebody in my home, but she said, it's just had a ripple effect. She said, everything is so much easier. She said, the things I couldn't do, which was to pick things up off the floor, because it was like, she was just depressed and she couldn't face it. It was too big, she couldn't face it. But she said, now everything functions. Everything gets washed up straight away. I've gone back to full-time work. I just delight at the fact that I can make a cup of coffee in my kitchen. And she said, honestly, it has given me back so many more things, but it's also given me a feeling of optimism about my future. Well, that's great, isn't it? So she's definitely one of our ambassadors. And then there's going to be a large base of training materials and all this sort of evidence and stuff that we find, which will be put on a website for people to use in the future. This is, you know, this belongs to Birmingham City. And so, so it should be shared by anybody who needs it. And the main and important thing is that anybody who lives in Birmingham who has hoarding issues will be reassured that they will be heard and understood. So as I said, the ambassadors will, they either give me video testimonials, written testimonials, sometimes just audio recording testimonials, and they talk about what worked for them and why. And sometimes they think about the fact that if there hadn't been an intervention, things wouldn't have changed, because a lot of people had lived like that for many years. So let's have a look at why people hoard. So there are 3 main reasons. The research for this only started in the mid-90s. So it's really quite new, and it doesn't, you know, it's not overrun with research either. And so hopefully our research that we're doing in Birmingham will feed into this pond. But in America, they started looking at the idea, first of all, was that hoarding might be genetic. And they did find a common chromosome in a lot of people that had hoarding issues. But really, the most common cause for this behavior appeared to be, it was a trauma response or a survival response. Now, I think it's just worth spending a little time with the word trauma here, because we all know it and we know what it means, but we don't know what it does to us unless we have had a traumatic incident. And what happens when somebody experiences trauma is it affects your body first. We have something called the autonomic nervous system, and that is what keeps us breathing when we're asleep. So we can't turn it off. And this is where the idea that this isn't a choice comes from. So in our brains, we've got like 3 bits to our brain, and the bit in the middle is the ancient brain, the original one, and that had one purpose really, which was to keep us alive. And one of the really important things that brain needed to do was to be alerted to danger, and to alert us to danger through the autonomic nervous system, which when it picks up a danger signal, it will send out bodily actions to allow us to run or to fight. So this is our fight or flight. And that's what happens when somebody is traumatized. They will be alerted that there is danger. Now, if this happens with children, children have very little knowledge about how to save themselves, what to do, but it will still affect them and it will still frighten them. But if you want to know what this feels like, in a small sort of example of it, imagine you're walking up the road. This has probably happened to all of us at some point. You're walking up the road, quite happy, minding your own business, and somebody pips a car horn behind you, and you really jump. You go, oh gosh. And if you paid attention to your body, you would feel all these things. You would feel a shock, because that is cortisol and adrenaline flashing through your body, getting you ready to run or to fight. Then that, to be able to do that, that needs to draw down on some of your other faculties. So what it does is it stops your digestion because you haven't got time for a sandwich. It puts your heartbeat up and your blood pressure up. It also affects your ability to hear and to reason, because you haven't got time to have a debate about this. You've just got to run. You've got to just knee-jerk react, literally, to this. And then what will happen is, and you'll shallow breathe, that you'll do shallow breathing. And all these things indicate danger. And so you're in a state of agitation. And then what will happen is then you'll turn around and look and see that somebody had kicked a ball in the road, and oh, it's okay, it's not me. And then it's sort of like, and that taking of a deep breath actually is one of the things that tells your nervous system that it was a false alarm. But if you don't know that that's happening to you, if that trauma is deep and painful and frightening and genuinely a threat, you will stay in that state of agitation for a long, long time. It will keep coming back. And the brain then goes, this is no good. This is dangerous. We need to do something. We can't stay in a constant state of agitation. We need something to soothe. And so depending on where you are in your life, you will reach out for something that soothes. This is all a subconscious action. You're not aware this is happening at all. So this is where the lack of choice comes from. And some people will choose alcohol or drugs. Some people might choose self-harming. Some people might overeat. Some people might choose to gather and to bring stuff to them and to buy stuff and acquire stuff, because we are hunter-gatherers. This is a natural thing. We gather when there's a glut, but we live in a permanent glut now. So this desire to gather is easy to feed. And I think we all recognize that. I think most of us are consumers. We're good at buying stuff, but we've got the off button. We can let it go. When somebody has a traumatic response and hoards, if you then challenge that stuff, they go straight back into fight or flight, because that is putting them, as far as their brain is concerned, into a state of danger. And this is where the illogicalness of it comes from. But it is also quite dangerous to override this quickly. And the best analogy I heard for this was a chemical analogy. So if you get, I think it's hydrochloric acid and sodium chlorate, but I can't remember the second one. Anyway, you get a beaker of each. If you pour one into the other straight away, quickly, it will explode. And so it's not a clever thing to do. But if you get a dropper and you just put a droplet at a time of one into the other, it forms salt, table salt. So this is the sort of approach that people who've had trauma in their life need. You can't face them with that trauma. And by ripping out their solution straight away, you are just re-traumatizing people. I know that it has to happen sometimes, but just be aware that you can be aware of that and they still aren't. So how can you help them to understand? The first thing and the most important thing that all of us can do is we can reassure people. We can be a reassuring voice, a reassuring tone of voice, a reassuring choice of words, a reassuring smile, a reassuring eye movement, body gestures, the way we dress even can reassure people. And that is in our gift. And that is our non-verbal communication. And that's what we should be using. No matter what your role in this, you can all do that. And then there's a third reason why people hoard, and that's called organizational dyslexia, or I call it that anyway, because I think we all understand dyslexia now. Dyslexia is not somebody willingly refusing to learn to read. It's somebody who struggles to learn to read the way most people manage to learn to read. But of course, you don't know that you don't know how to read like everybody else, because how do you know how everybody else learns to read? So it's important that this is spotted and supported. And then people are okay, they can get on, but you need to know it. Organizational dyslexia is when people don't know how to make homes for things. So when you bring shopping into your home, you probably take this for granted. You know where to put it. You might not want to sometimes because you're a bit tired, but you know where the beans go. You know where to put the cornflakes, and you know where to put clothes when you buy new ones. But if you don't, life is really hard. And like I said, you don't know that you don't know it. So you can't even ask for help for it. And this is when I said earlier, lots of young families struggle with this issue. It gets classified as neglect. People get punished, shouted at, threatened, have children removed, and at no point do they ever get any support. And that is really sad and wrong, because then it becomes historical. And so this is why I said at the beginning, for me, it's really important to understand what you're looking at. This is a great tool. One of the guys that wrote all the books that I read in the first place, whose name's Dr. Randy Frost. There are about 4 or 5 Americans that are my heroes. And I got to meet Randy Frost in 2018 when he came to a conference in Edinburgh, which was lovely. And I'd actually done a radio program with him, which neither of us had met each other then, but we did get to meet in Edinburgh, and I did a masterclass with him then. But it was his students who made this. And they made it because they needed something to quickly describe what was being seen. Because if you have to describe it yourself, you put emotion into that description. And so number 4 might freak you out completely. Whereas for other people, number 4 might look a bit like home, especially at the weekend. And so this was very important, although it was created. So you can use it to identify, you can use it to show to clients, you can use it as aspirational. Where do you think you'd like to be? Where do you think feels, where do you think we would feel was safe? Do you think you could You know, does that appeal to you? A lot of people think number one is horrible because they're very creative people and they like stuff around them. So number one lady said, oh my God, that looks like a prison cell. So useful tool. And then this is what we all know. We all love the before and afters, don't we? We love the before and afters because then we can go, oh, that is the moment. And there is a real reason why we do that. And this is the other important thing to know about hoarding. On the left, when you walk into that, no matter how professional you are, you will go into a state of panic. You'll go into a state of overwhelm, into a state of anxiety, into a state of fight or flight. Because that little guardian in our brain that's looking for safety sees that environment, can't see an escape route, can't see any symmetry, can't see how to get out of there if there was danger. And so it will alert you to this being a dangerous environment. And that is why nobody wants to work with people who hoard, because the environment is shouting at them and telling them to clear. And then you see that when you go, oh yeah, that's great, because you can see the escape route. You just feel relief. This is normal. We just need to know this fact to be able to work with people. It won't go away. Like I said, you can't turn your autonomic nervous system off. It will stay there. It will be there forever. It should be until you die, and then it does switch off. But this is what prevents you from talking to somebody without you panicking and going, I've got to raise safeguarding. It's really difficult. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying take a deep breath. Remember that there's a person in that room that you can see at the end there now, and you need to address that person as though the stuff wasn't there. And then you will learn loads. And then the after picture, which is a bad picture. Sorry, I take all these pictures and I'm not good. It means for this lady, it was just really good. She moved house because where she lived in that flat had really bad memories and the flat wasn't really good for her. And they moved her somewhere else, gave her a PA who helped her with the issues she had. But you can see from that flat, it's not minimalist, but it's not hoarded anymore. And visiting post-work is also important. Keep people on board somehow. So it's the before and after of a person that you really want. And that's really difficult to get. I think I've got one video of somebody at the beginning, and that's because they asked to be in a television program so they could get someone to work with them. But otherwise, it's very difficult to get the before of a person because you need to get them when they're at their most vulnerable, they're most scared, and they haven't learned anything about you or them by then. But if you can use this as your benchmark, so you're looking at the person, not their house. So that's what's going to make the difference. So what do you think that will look like? The person, not, what will they behave like? How will it feel to them? How will they talk about their experience, post-experience? And this can be your guide to how you work with people, rather than just counting the results as how many black bags have left that week. So these are some of the past approaches. Leave it alone. This is what used to happen. Before we had as much statutory legislation around visiting rental properties, certainly leave it alone or punish. If you think about the majority of ways that people who hoard are treated, it's punishment. They are told off, they're shouted, they're threatened, they're given time constraints. Hardly anybody holds their hand, hardly anybody talks to them as though they're a human being sometimes. Or you've got clear the house, we'll do a massive clear. We'll put you in a hotel and then we'll put you back. No help for the person. Do you know what? Strangely enough, it fills up again. I don't know how many people tell me that with like, as though I'm going to be amazed. But if you think about it, if you don't help the source carries on. And then mental health assessments will fail. Unfortunately, there isn't a specifically useful mental health assessment that will show that somebody has severe hoarding or self-neglect issues, but a capacity assessment is fine, a memory test is fine. How do you help that person? is very difficult. So this is one of the things that I'm going to try to get the PhD student to look at with me, with Birmingham University's research stuff. And where do people go? So as I said, Clouds End CIC was the first social enterprise in the UK. Then Hoarding UK became a charity, which I used to be chair of before the project, but I'm too busy to do that now. Hoarding Disorders was in Berkshire's, moved to Devon. LifePod does a lot of really good work in Scotland, also a social enterprise. My Living Room is based in Essex. And then Help for Hoarders was the resource website that was set up by Jasmine Harman when she made some television programs with me on the BBC. She's about to relaunch that because she doesn't like the name Hoarders anymore, so she's going to call it hoardingsupport.co.uk. But that's happening in Hoarding Awareness Week, which is in May, starts the week starting the 16th of May this year. So if anybody is thinking about doing anything, doing it for Hoarding Awareness Week or working towards Hoarding Awareness Week, just raise awareness. You know, what could you do to raise awareness around hoarding? So yes, have a think about that. And then therapies, cognitive behavior therapy, which is CBT, sorry, I should have written it out big, is the only one that's had some research done, and it can be good. It can be useful, but some people just they just haven't got enough mental space to do cognitive behavior therapy because it does require homework. And often cognitive behavior therapy will help people's self-esteem, for example, which then will allow them to feel a bit stronger to look at the issues in hand. Counselling obviously for bereavement, for loss, which is often the cause of the traumas that people are relating to. Motivational interviewing is used in addictions, and it's really getting people to find their own solution, to look at how they might, you know, the therapy is to get people talking until they realize they've talked what they can do. EFT is a bit weirder. It's emotional freedom technique. This is tapping of chakras. You know, you tap certain places around your body. It is weird, but it is ancient Chinese as well, and it does work for some people. Hypnotherapy, mindfulness. We advocate mindfulness wherever we can because it's a simple practice. You can do it yourself. You don't have to have any special equipment or go to a gym or anything like that. You can learn mindfulness because it teaches you to live in the moment, to be still, but it teaches you to notice. It teaches you to notice your environment, and it teaches you to notice your thinking. And we use that in our support groups a lot. We encourage people to think about how they're thinking. We don't challenge their thinking. We just ask them to notice it. And then they can say it. And then they go, oh, right, I see. Yeah, I could do this then, couldn't I? And so they aren't so wrapped up in it, and they start to sort of peel off their own layers. And then compassion focused therapy is another therapy created by Paul Gilbert in Derby, at Derby University. And this is all about self-compassion. So it's learning how you can do things even if you don't feel motivated. That's sort of basically it's one of its main functions. And then you've got this, there is a huge stigma around hoarding behavior. It's not treated sympathetically. You only have to look at what the press do with it. They love it. They absolutely love it. They're never going to show it in a good light. It's always shock horror probe. It's always disgusting, rat infested, moldy, you know, no water, no heating, no lighting, lived like a wild person. Nobody ever really writes up about what causes it, and very rarely do you, even the television programs, even the ones I was in, I was quite disappointed with. Because I just forget that TV's there to entertain and make you go, oh my God. It's misunderstood and prejudged very often because of some of this. You know, if you heard lots of good stories and everybody was fighting to go and work with people who hoard, it would be great, wouldn't it? You know, we go, no, I found Mrs. Smith. I'm going to go and work with her. She'll be brilliant. It'll be fantastic. It doesn't happen like that. It's hot potato syndrome. They're often handed round. Still within this project, I spend a lot of time explaining to people it's multi-agency, it's working together, it's not referral and shunting. You know, you can tell me about your referral, but tell me what you're going to do within this project to help Mrs. Smith as well as me. And then people are scared of asking for help should they one day decide that, you know, it is too much. Normally they're opening another can of worms. And often, so this is where GPs need to be more aware, really. People will go to the GP for something, but really they want to talk about the fact that their house is completely hoarded and they don't know how to start that conversation because they're fearful that somebody will just take their house off them, or their kids, or both. So the issue is, this is, you're sort of observing someone's successful and subconscious coping strategy, which is not their fault. As I said, it's not a choice, it's happened to them. But then it becomes a habit. Because it's been successful, it's made people feel less anxious. And so then it just gets practiced over and over again. So it's quite difficult to undo, certainly overnight. You know, this is why it is a long-term job. And you go back and check, because people don't change they don't flip-flop overnight from one to the other. It takes time. And it's been practiced over many years as well, if you like. And so then often people will deal with the clutter, not the person. And so they will try and wrest all the stuff off them. And you're just flinging somebody into that state of anxiety again. And so they say, get out, leave me alone, don't come anywhere near me, I'll sort this out on my own, because they're in a state of panic and they don't know why. So what is the key? Understanding. That's what I said at the beginning, and that's what I say all the way through, and that's what I say through all my training and whenever I talk to anybody, because it is the key. And then finding the right partners, finding partners who will agree with you, who are going to support within this team, that are all singing from the same hymn sheet, and they're prepared to work long term. And then don't personalize the progress. When I say that, I mean, don't make it your journey, because it is great when somebody's like batting on and things are really going well. Then you're sort of thinking, oh, this is fantastic, you know, next week we'll do this and we'll get in the kitchen, and then they have a bit of a lapse and you then sink into disappointment, and then that'll show on your face. So if you are just interested in facilitating somebody's journey, it's really hard. I'm saying this, but it's difficult to do. All these things happen to me. I'm not Mrs. Saint. It's just that if you can bring yourself back to it, it helps you. Work with individuals at their own pace. Don't force anybody. Don't keep going on about you've only got 2 weeks to work with them. Just say, within these 2 weeks, I can work with you. Let's see what we can do that will really help you for the next few weeks. And then we'll try and find some extra support. You know, don't go, well, if you don't do it in 2 weeks, then I'm gone, and God knows who's going to come and help you then. Help them to create new strategies and habits and things that are going to help them. Small, really doable tasks. This is where lots of people fail. They'll panic at the amount of stuff that's there. They'll set ridiculous tasks like, this house, this room's got to be cleared, and then the house has got to be cleared in 2 weeks. And that is just overwhelming. And then they'll go and nothing's happened. What you want is, you want to say, do you think you could do a carrier bag before I come the next time? Even though your brain is going, oh my God, there's so much stuff to do. Keep it quiet, trust to the system, and say, if you can do a carrier bag, that would be amazing. And I want you to notice all the thoughts you have when you do it. And then we can talk about it. And then when you go back, if the carrier bag is done, loads of praise. Loads and loads of praise, and remind them they need to praise themselves, because they won't know how to do that. And that is part of their help. If they haven't done it, don't be angry, be curious and say, do you know, that's really interesting, because I thought that you were really on this. I thought you were going to, you know, get stuck in, and then they will know the feeling of success. You want them to know that. You don't want them to disappoint you, and you don't want to be disappointed, really. So make sure that it's a weeny doable task. Then ask questions, loads, chat, conversation, slow testing and reinforcing of a carrier bag here, a couple of newspapers there, something else, something else, something else. Could we restack stuff? What can we do today? Or shall we just have a chat? Because that's action. Patience and understanding. Encouraging your client to self-talk solutions. So really encourage them to look for things that they can do for themselves and encourage their curiosity as well as your curiosity. Because if they become curious about them, you don't want them to be angry and disappointed in themselves. You want them to be curious about themselves so they can help themselves. So in short, we've got conversations, as many as you can have, because those establish trust, relationship connections, you find things out, and then curiosity for both of you. You be curious, but encourage them to be curious about themselves. Creativity, think of even some of the wildest ideas might be appealing to someone you're working with. You want to find things that go down their route of thinking. And so don't say, well, you can't be like that, you can't do that, you can't do that. That's because you love art, don't you? So maybe have you ever thought about joining an art therapy group? Because you could take some of your stuff, couldn't you, and share it? Maybe they'd love you, you know, and then maybe you could even share some of your skills. That's the way to do it. And then perseverance, stick it out, be prepared, long haul. And if it can't be you that perseveres, how can you build it into a multi-agency setting so that there is long-term attention for this person, not intense, just long-term, just popping back occasionally, just getting them to a point and then saying, right, well, I think you're great for a bit, you keep going, I'm going to come back in a couple of months. So these are my project outcomes so far. So I have achieved just over the training, which is 671 people who I hope have got more confidence because they understand things better. 223 citizens we've supported, and within that number, we've done 48 skips. Sorry, 48 managed clearances. That is when a team of people go, and I can only afford one of those per house, and that's usually one or maybe two rooms. So if the house is completely hoarded, I have to find other people within the groups of people that I work with that might be able to fund another bit of it to get it completely done. 70 skips. Now, sometimes people have had more than one skip, which is fine, but those have all been skips they've asked for. They haven't been forced on them. They never work if they just get delivered. They need to ask for them. And also, you need to know that they are able to fill them. So if somebody asks for a skip, say, yes, that should be fine, but can you, if it arrived tomorrow, could you fill it straight away? And if they say no, say, well, we can still get you the skip, but let's get some stuff bagged up and put with stickers on and things so that you can fill that skip quickly. Otherwise, your neighbours will, and that's a waste of money. 38 face-to-face interventions. So that's when people have needed a softer approach, and people that will do a slower removal of stuff. 12 citizens have been helped with phone counselling. These are regular phone counsel sessions, not one-offs. And then there's hopefully a bigger sense of teamwork for people who've worked together on these issues. Things have been easier and they've just felt more satisfying to have worked together. And then the most important thing is citizens who feel supported and understood. That is the goal for this project, really, because it was to increase the feeling of well-being for the citizens of Birmingham. So I've come to the end of my talk, and I would say I just have one rule. It needs to be fun. I hope you can find a sense of humor somewhere. You don't have to laugh at people, laugh with them. But if you try to make what is a very serious and very debilitating and sometimes fatal condition for people, if you can make your time with them a bit more interesting and a bit more amusing, then please try and find that fun. Thank you for listening. And if you need to contact me, then that is my email address, help@cloudzen.org.uk.